Okay, and we are live. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing today?
I'm great. You've been busy. You've been tough. You've been tough to get a hold of. You've been all over the map. We chatted when you were in England. We chatted when you were here, but super busy. And now I finally got you in the studio.
Fun times. It is the end of the year. The end of the year into the beginning of the year is always crazy, right?
It is. Yeah, I think Christmas was nice though. It was like a nice downtime, and now it's award season, so everyone's just busy congratulating themselves.
Right now, giving each other a pat on the back. Well done.
And Ryan Gosling is going to sing the Ken song at the Oscars.
Oh, and we can't wait. There's something.
Been waiting for that for a long time. Yeah. So how's 2024 been for you? We're just kind of getting into it. It's
Good. It's good. I think that it's an exciting time. I mean, I think that it is, especially, it's a difficult time in our industry for everybody, right? I think that it's exciting, at least in the documentary world, at least in the brand world and things. And so I'm looking forward to this year. Also, every time that one has new projects to take out, it's always an exciting time.
Yeah, when you've got things in your back pocket that you want to show people, that's the best. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's tough going into meetings when you have no ideas.
Yeah, and also because you've been working on something for so long and developing for so long that it's just nice to finally get it out there and talk to people about it, isn't it?
Absolutely. So you do have a few projects on the go. You are trying to pitch some things and get some things off the ground?
Soon, yeah.
Yeah.
Couple of weeks now, and we'll be taking out one project. I have another one that I am just starting to take out now, and then partnering with someone else right now, working out something around a great character that we found, and we're just not sure exactly what that is. But this is sort of the fun part, right? Is having stuff at all different stages of development.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to do the beginning conceptualizing stuff for one, and then you get to do like the more nitty gritty for another. And I like variety.
Shaping ideas into like packageable content that you can share with people is the best. Like when you have an idea and you go, okay, how to make this, a 46-minute TV show, or how do I make this a 90-minute doc? Like what are the beats you have to hit, in that person's life or in this story that's going to, carry the audience through. To me, that's amazing. Doing that before you go out into the field and then try to make it happen.
Yeah, I guess there's two different things that are going on at the same time in my mind every time that I'm developing something. There's the concept development, which you want to be able to find the story within the concept, no matter what that is, right? But then at the same time, there's that other half of me, which is thinking on the development side, on the sales side, who is it for? How long is it? What format is it going to be seen in?
Mm-hmm.
And then starting to shape it along those lines too. So there's always like, I never want to let the concept sort of get away from me because I'm trying to fit it into some sort of box. I feel like that is where television development was for a really, really long time, where it was like, hey, we've got these 3 buckets. And so you're trying to fit everything into a bucket all the time. But that's the nice thing with docs, is that you can find the story within the story, right? But then at the same time, you do have to be thinking about how it's going to be seen, who's going to finance it, what's important to those audiences, So it's a balancing act.
Well, one of the reasons I was so excited to catch up with you, not number one because you do docs and I do docs, so that's great. More in the television space for me, but episodic television. But I love the fact that you are a creator, a buyer, and a seller, and you have done those things at various stages in your entire career. So the entire ecosystem of how to get a project up and off the ground, sold, broadcasted, and then roll that into something, your next project. So this kind of knowledge is amazing, and the fact that you've been able to keep it going and to continue coming up with new ideas and to get them out into the world has been remarkable.
Well, I do think that having a solid foundation as a creator, as someone who knows the ins and outs of how to make something, is hugely important. And then being a buyer and a seller, it all depends. I was a network exec, so I was a buyer for television, which is completely different now, of course. I left that at the end of 2016. And then being a seller, it depends who you're selling to, right? And so going from television and exploring being a showrunner, being a network exec, being a head of development for a Prodco, and just exploring all those different worlds and seeing what I liked about them, and where I really wanted to stay. Because quite frankly, the reason was really because I was curious. I just wanted to know what everybody else was doing. Once I knew how to make a show, I just wanted to know, why are they buying the show? And then, so that's when you get into the buying and selling world. And then after that, when I was like, I just really don't love all the stuff that I'm having to develop and sell, and I just wanted to focus on docs, that's when I went over into the brand world. And then that's getting to know a whole different world again, the ad agency world. And then, because we've all made branded content for years.
That's all there is anymore, yeah.
Yeah, and now it's full of it, right? But it's not like branded content was so incredibly new to so many television producers and directors and things. People had done a lot of it.
I think the difference now is, sorry to interrupt you, I think the difference now is like branded content is like everything now. And I think back like 10 years ago, it maybe represented 30% or 20% of the market. But I just feel like the television budgets have shrunk so much that branded content is the only thing people are looking to get done now, because the TV companies, the broadcasters, the linear broadcasters especially, are so squeezed.
Which is so ironic, because I remember when I was at Viacom and I was a VP of development and I was buying shows, people would bring me shows at times with brands attached. And it was the hardest thing for me to get through. Like trying to get through a concept with a brand attached within Viacom when they've already got their own department that does exactly that, and you're selling everything at upfronts, and they've got their advertisers they're promising certain things to. It's a nightmare, right? And so I literally used to have to say to people, if there's a brand attached, we probably aren't going to do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Because you have so many advertising responsibilities on your own with Viacom, like you couldn't, to try to match those up would be impossible.
Yeah, there's just so many conflicts in so many categories all the time that you could start to wade into it if it's something that someone at the very, very top really wanted. And so that did happen a time or two. So I knew how difficult it was. But then jump to now, and everybody's clamoring for it. So
it is. I mean, I remember going out and making TV shows with like BMW as a sponsor, because I was making the motorcycle show Tough Rides, right? And I remember I did Tough Rides Brazil, and I had cleared the sponsor with Travel Channel back in the day, because that's who took it. But then as I was trying to reach other territories and get the show into other regions of the world, a lot of them said, "Oh, we can't take it because it's got BMW, and like Volkswagen is our biggest sponsor on our channel, so we can't do it," right? Like, so they didn't want to be showing other brands in a positive light when they've got a different brand as their major sponsor. And then these are actually decisions that stop people from seeing TV shows. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
100%. So that beats. I mean, that all goes to the bottom line of huge companies that are not about to shift. I mean, I remember being told, like, I don't care how much you want this show, nobody cares. Nobody cares. And so that's just the way it was back then. I like the fact that we have so much access to brands now. I love the fact that brands understand how important content is. Social, digital content, absolutely. That's one of the things that I do, is lead productions on that end for agencies. But also for longer form content that you really cannot get into in normal advertising. When you are focused on supporting a community and it being actually authentic as opposed to just a brand campaign, not that brand campaigns are inauthentic, but you know what I mean, as opposed to just paid media, all the earned media that you can get with a doc, and with aligning yourself and supporting people, a cause, whatever it is. That's really exciting times when you can match up the right film with the right brand and their interests align. Yeah. Everybody wins.
Yeah, exactly. And then of course you get great exposure from that, and it's authentic exposure, right? It's something that's a little bit more meaningful when it's well thought out.
It is. And also you can just get into topics that networks aren't necessarily interested in, right? If they're not calling for topics about, meaningful relationships or something emotional, and instead they want, what is everything now? True crime doc, some sort of doc with IP attached. You've got some big celebrities, so especially in music doc, right? That's where everything is focused. But when you try to look at sort of the the categories of docs out there, it's very, very small if you don't go straight to a brand. And then you can align on whatever character-driven person, place, thing you want to get behind and explore, topic to explore. That's what's most exciting to me, is that you don't have to fall into buckets that we would traditionally have to within any sort of network or streamer, right?
Yeah.
Anytime that anybody would call and say, so what are you looking for? You'd be like, okay, well, here are our 3 buckets. We want dating shows. We want food shows. We do not want any more lifestyle shows. We don't,
Yeah.
I just don't develop like that.
I'm still waiting for Netflix to get turned on by travel shows, but everyone's just said it's all moved to YouTube, so that's pretty much it.
No, YouTube's where it's at.
Yeah, it's amazing how YouTube has developed, especially as a platform for this kind of format as well. It's been very interesting.
Yeah. YouTube. I mean, that is everything. That is everything, along with the socials, of course.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. So let's go back a bit. How did you get into this space? I always find that journey very interesting. So where are you from originally?
Originally from England. My family came here when I was young, and I grew up in Northern California, went to university in Boston, and then a week after I graduated, I moved back to England.
Okay. So what was it like moving to Northern California at a young age? I mean, it's beautiful up there. Where were you exactly?
Stockton, Lodi, about an hour and a half east of San Francisco. Yeah, I mean, it was great. I can't complain about growing up in California. I love England, though. That's why we split our time now, and my family is still back in England too. So I have family in both.
You got to admit the weather's much better out here.
Well, Southern California, especially.
The California, especially, it's been a nice transition for me. So I've been enjoying it a lot. Yeah, I did 18 years in Shanghai, and then I did 4 years in Dubai, which was basically just riding out COVID. Yeah, and then I'm here. So it's it's been interesting. But
and how long have you been back?
Since I got here in November.
November. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it's only a couple of months.
Yeah, and after 25 years of living abroad, basically. Yeah.
How's it feel?
It's getting used to it again. I think the ebbs and flows of the way the United States works is pretty interesting. But as a Canadian living here, I don't get too bothered by a lot of the major issues that seem to be touch points or trigger points for people here. So I don't talk politics with people and stuff like that. Just talk about adventures and making things and fulfilling our creative passions.
What's given you the greatest sort of culture shock coming back?
I think it's just the advertising. The advertising in the United States is really aggressive, and it's everywhere, right? And I think, obviously China and India, they advertise heavily to their populations as well. But, I was splitting time, in Switzerland, for example, and everything's a little bit more toned down there. So that was coming from a Switzerland ecosystem to LA now. It's just billboards and advertisements and text messages every, hour on your phone telling you to buy something new. Yeah, it's bombarding your brain with opportunities to buy things all the time. So it's a lot. I try not to watch any TV or commercials and stuff.
Yeah, well, that helps.
Yeah,
that helps.
Until I can get back to living in a tent for 2 weeks every month, which was pretty much my existence for a decade before COVID.
And that's what you're hoping to get back to.
I think at some stage, yeah, when the right opportunity comes around. I think the way I like to describe it is like 2019 was like peak risk for television creation, and I rode that wave. From 2010 when I made my first TV show, I worked for the New York Times for 10 years covering China, and then 2008 financial crisis basically killed the publishing industry. So freelance day rates and stuff like that tumbled massively. So I got out of that business, and then I went into television as a result of that. And my first TV show was riding a motorcycle around China with my brother. So we set a Guinness World Record, and we made it without a commission, and then sold it to Travel Channel, and then they ended up picking up the rest of the shows. But as I progressed in my career, it was just easier and easier to get money from people. And then in 2019, I call 2019 peak me. Like I did 10 episodes. I did 10 expeditions in 10 countries in 10 months, which were 10 46-minute episodes for Discovery Channel. And I also did 42 speaking events in 2019. So Yeah, so and that's why I was living in Dubai, because it was so easy to get around the world from the Middle East, so and the great airlines and stuff like that. So that was kind of like peak me, and then COVID hit, and it's just been like rebuilding, but also the change, like the branding, the celebrity-driven stuff. All this stuff doesn't really fit with how I was making content before, so I've had to like kind of figure out how to make some new adjustment.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's been an adjustment for everybody.
it has. Yeah, I mean, there's just no one taking like real risk anymore. I mean, I had a development meeting like 2 weeks ago, and the broadcaster, the creative director was basically saying like 5 or 10 years ago, we would take our budget and divide it up into 10 and give that money to 10 storytellers to create 10 different like distinguishable content, like 10 different stories, in which yours might have been one of them. But now we just put the whole budget into one project with a celebrity, and then we have to like break through the noise. That's like the key term that everyone's been saying, and you don't do that unless you have like a Jason Momoa for Discovery Channel, or like a Chris Hemsworth doing National Geographic, and these guys are already major movie stars. So it's funny how that's shifted, and I'm wondering if we're all going to get tired of watching celebrities cook or fix their cars.
Well, I mean, personally, I think so. I may have already reached that point. Yeah, I mean, I think that at the end of the day, people thirst for genuine stories, and normal humans are fascinating too. And it doesn't have to cost $10 million to make something that is fascinating. And I mean, you'll find it from TikTok series where someone is speaking from their car for 50 episodes about something that is important and that is riveting to others, and they're getting 2-3 million views each day, right? Like, that is, people want things that are authentic. I think that one of the interesting and, for me, exciting shifts that's happened since COVID, and with this sort of streamlining of buyers and just how much money there is shrinking all the time and things. One of the interesting things is that, and with the explosion of technology, of course, there are ways to streamline production where you basically have much smaller teams now, but people can do much more. So for those of us who can do a lot, who can shoot, who can write, who can actually put things together, that is a great opportunity, right? Because creators are one-man bands. Those of us who come out of television, who can do things on our own, we can do the same, right? And we can do it knowing how to tell stories at a premium level too. And so if you just get out there and start making some things, I think that that's the only way to show what you can do these days. And then you bring together small teams of talented people who can do a lot of different things, and you can make things at a price point that is less expensive than obviously a television show, and you can still turn out something that is incredibly good quality. I also love the fact that you don't have too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, I think that's always been a key for me, is not having too many people around trying to like dictate how things are supposed to look. Or that's a big thing. That's why I got into making independent TV, actually, just to go out on my own.
Yeah, and I mean that's what I focus on now. I mean, other than, we can go back to the like the bio stuff, but right now when I'm developing a documentary, yes, I have a big budget doc that is expensive and my passion project, and I will make that happen eventually. But you only have like one of those, right? All the rest are smaller. You can shoot them, but their ideas, the core of what they're about, align with a certain brand who wants to support that community, that subculture, those people, whatever it is. And then you can actually get those things off the ground. And as opposed to television, you can actually retain ownership. Which is amazing, right? And, residuals do make ends meet in some ways. So it's been good, yeah. It's just that perhaps we in the television world need to, as producers, need to learn a bit more about international sales and distribution. And I mean, for me, that's something that once I sort of switched out of the television world in 2019 and more into the advertising world and the brand world. And not just doing branded content, but within advertising agencies and understanding how the agency world works. Sorry, I just totally lost my English.
It's okay. I can jump in for a second because you were talking about ownership rights and equity and distribution and global distribution. I think this is a big difference because in the United States, when you make a show, the broadcaster basically takes 100% ownership of the show and then owns it and exploits it globally if it's strong enough, and that's how they make their money back, right? But I've always made shows for international markets, so I've always had to like use an agent. So I have an agent in London who basically like sells the show to linear broadcasters and stuff like that, but watching that process like unfold, seeing the royalty sheets come back. Oh, we sold into like Russia, or we sold into Africa, and all these other, it's not a lot of money per episode or per hour, but it does add up, and it's interesting to see how that distribution works. And when you make shows in the U.S., you lose all of that knowledge about where your show is actually being seen and how many people are seeing it and what the revenue is that comes back is like. It's totally different business.
Yeah, for the longest time, television producers, not production companies, of course, but producers themselves, when they would create and sell a show, they don't really need to know any of that stuff because they're not going to get any of those rights.
Yeah.
Right? And now with brands, you can. I mean, but it all depends what the brand wants out of the project too. Like, why are they going into this? Why are they financing it? What are they hoping to get out of it? And that sort of strategy that comes with a documentary is something that I've been putting together for a number of years now. And that is something that I'm just starting to take out now with the films that I'm developing as I go out to brands, talking about what their return is, how to structure a deal where it works for everybody and everybody wins.
Right.
Because we have
something that no one wants anymore.
Yeah.
The idea that someone can make something and put it out into the world where everyone wins is it should be something that's universally accepted, but it's not.
No, it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
But the opportunity is there, and it's so exciting. I mean, it is a really exciting time in that sense. And so I enjoy this. We're going to see how it plays out this year with some of the things that I'm taking out. So I'll give you an update then.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. You can come back at the end of the year and we can go through like a report card about like how we did. Did I get back to making TV this year? Did I go out and like, how many nights did I sleep in a tent, Exactly. Yeah.
That's how you judge your...
That's how I judge my mental health.
Yeah.
Because, man, being out in nature is just calming. It's the best, yeah.
That's one of the things that I love about being back in England is that we have a place in London, so I can work out of London, but also my family has a farm out in Suffolk, and so we have a cottage out there, and just being out in the middle of nowhere.
It's very peaceful. Yeah, I miss it a lot. I think I had this, I think in 2019 especially, like we did 10 months filming, so we were 5 months in production and 5 months kind of in between production. And those 5 months we spent on the road filming, like in the middle of nowhere, living in tents and stuff like that. It was like the best I'd slept. It was the most relaxed I'd been. It was like the best I'd looked, like, just sleep matters, and not being stressed all the time matters and all these things. So it was a very, very peaceful 10 months, even though we were in production and moving and doing a lot of stressful things. But it was counterbalanced by just spending so much time out in nature and just being off the grid.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love everything about that.
Well, can you imagine? Like so one of the episodes we did was in China, and we did an episode in the Badain Jarain Desert, which is this beautiful desert in China just south of the Mongolian border. And we did like 140 kilometer walk, which was maybe like, 90 miles, through this incredible desert with these massive sand dunes. And we were totally off the grid, no mobile phone connection, no villages, no water, no nothing. It was just us and like 16 camels and a camel driver and his wife to do the cooking. And we just went out and walked across this remote desert. And it was just the most peaceful thing in the world. And then we got great footage.
I've developed a lot of adventure docs, and especially like back when I was working for Big Grizzly, which is the production company that's sort of under Omnicom, sister companies with Shy Day, Media Arts Lab and things. We were developing a lot of docs for a lot of different brand clients, and Jeep was one of their clients. So being able to develop adventure docs and things, I love it.
Yeah.
Because I started, I just wanted to be a war correspondent. So I started by trying to hitchhike into war zones back in the day.
How was that? How did that? I'm glad you're still here.
Weirdly successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I went to Boston University. I was a year ahead because of high school credits and things. And so I took a year off so I could graduate with all my friends.
That's a nice thing to do for your friends, yeah? Let those slow folks catch up.
No, it's silly. But I did. And I went and I lived in Australia for 6 months and wrote speeches for a minister of parliament there, which was really fun because when I did a lot of writing. I come out of writing first. And I was really into politics, and I was deciding between, because I got a degree in journalism and political science. Am I going into journalism? What am I doing? And really all I wanted to do was be in the middle of war zones. I had always been obsessed with war and telling war stories and the common experience in war. And so I'd been obsessed with the Vietnam War when I was little, wrote my first essays on it and things. My parents, being English, were like, what is happening? We don't even really know much about this.
Right. No, exactly. Because Europe was totally not affected by that at all. Yeah.
But I just was fascinated by it. So when I took my year off, I took half the time and I went to Australia and I wrote speeches there and searched out the sort of the politics of it all, which I loved. But then I went off to Vietnam and traveled through for a month and just sort of hiked my way through.
And were you looking at specific places that you had read about, like during the Vietnam War? And you were kind of like war tourism in some way, shape, or form?
I know, it's crazy. It was back before they were letting a lot of people in, so there was only about 40 people in the country at any time who were tourists at that time. It was crazy. And I started in Hanoi and worked my way south. And in Hanoi, I got a guide she was my age, about 20, and she and her friends, they were all studying business and English at university.
Yeah.
And there was 5 of them and 1 of me, so there were 6 of us, and there were 3 mopeds, and they took me everywhere in the city, and I just sort of explored with them, and then made my way down south and crawled through the tunnels that I had read everything about, and the down tanks, and found people who were in the war, and just fascinating conversations. I was sort of obsessed with it. And then I went off to Africa for 6 months and fell in love with Africa.
Where'd you go in Africa by chance? I'm just curious. I love that continent. It's spectacular. I've filmed it a few times, and it's always just the people, the food, the culture, the nature. It delivers on every single front. Like I filmed in, where have I been? I was in Morocco. I was in Tanzania. We climbed Kili. I was in Uganda. We did this like guerrilla trek through southern Uganda. It was lush and gorgeous.
So that guerrilla trek at the base of the mountain, you know how you go over the border of Uganda and Rwanda and Congo? They're basically right
in that bottom knot where all the mountains are. We actually climbed the mountain. There's a mountain there you can climb where you're on all 3 borders. We actually went up there. That's where we started our journey.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? Okay, so I started in Nairobi, and then I traveled south and into Tanzania, crossed Lake Victoria, and then at the base of that mountain is where I, on the Ugandan side, met a border guard named Stephen, who said, if you want to camp here, I'll take care of you. I'll make sure that nothing happens. And I wanted to wait for some doctors to come through because Rwanda was starting. And I knew that whole thing was getting... And I had met some soldiers in Nairobi who had said, if you can make it to this city, we'll house you.
So Rwanda, the genocide in Rwanda. So this is like early 90s.
Yeah, mid-90s.
Mid-90s, yeah.
So okay, well, let's do it. So that's where I was trying to get to. And I camped out at the base of that mountain saw the most incredible sight. I was actually, at the base of that mountain, there's all the hills, and there's also a bunch of water running through lakes and things, right? And I just remember sitting on the edge of this lake and seeing across the water. It was a campfire. It was people who were singing and chanting and dancing in front of the campfire. So all I was seeing were silhouettes from far away.
That's a beautiful frame. Yeah.
As the whole sun was going down, there were fireflies. Amazing. That night, I'm pretty sure, is the night that I got malaria. Goodness, about a week later, I came down with that, because then some doctors did come through from the American Refugee Committee, 2 of them. And I said, Father said, "Doc, I know the basics. I could help. Let me help you." And frankly, they were so overwhelmed. They were, "Yes, fine, come help." And so they took me across the border, and we were on our way to Goma when we got the call, and across the radio it said that, that there were anybody who was white was being taken, was being kidnapped at the time. You have to stop, you have to turn back, is what the agency was saying. And so they sent us to a place called Jomba, which was...
Because Goma's in the Democratic Republic of Congo, right?
So we had already crossed over into Congo.
Yeah. Not a safe country by its own right.
Not easy. And so basically we set up a camp on the border of Rwanda and the Congo. And these 2 doctors were trying to not only set up a camp, but then teach the locals how to diagnose certain things so that they could then take care of themselves, because they would then have to move on and set up a new camp.
And these were refugee camps that were being set up on the border.
Yeah, that were being set up by the UN on the border. And so really just my producer brain, what can I do except for I can organize everybody.
Yeah.
I can create some sort of organization here, and really just wandered, was able to take photos and talk to people. And I found that there were just basically 2 8-year-old boys who came to either side of me and ended up leading me around. They were my guide. And they told the adults, they told everybody who could talk to me, who couldn't talk to me. They spoke some English and they spoke French. I grew up being taught French. I will not say that I speak French. I grew up being taught French for 12 years, so I should speak more French than I do. But I was able to speak a bit of French with them. I picked up a bit of Swahili, so between us all, we could just sort of muddle by. And that was really where I got my first introduction to, I don't want, because at this time I thought that I wanted to be a war correspondent. I was like, I don't want to put this into 30 seconds. I want to make films about this where you get to meet these people and you hear their stories, and it was incredible. And then while I was there, a fire broke out, most of the camp burned down, and people were fleeing, and it was just to tell the stories of these people, what they had gone through, what these kids were doing, who these kids were. I mean, these kids that have taken over, because the strong will survive, right? And these 8-10-year-old boys who are running things there. It was just quite incredible to see. And that's when I came back and I was like, I want to make films. I don't want to go to news anymore.
Yeah. The printed word is important, but it definitely lacks visual stimulation when you're telling stories from exotic parts of the world, no matter how happy or sad they are, right? Video is real power.
Yeah. Just the faces, just the looks, the faces, people. I mean, I am forever fascinated by all of it.
I got into it in a strange way too. I was living in Shanghai, China, and it was a city of 30 million people. And I was working for the New York Times. I was a photographer, so I was a documentary photographer. I was working for the Times, but I was also working for Time, Newsweek, Forbes, Fortune, the whole thing. And I was their China guy. So I was. It was great. It was from 2001 to 2000 and I guess around 2010. China was in every headline, right? So it was a good time to be there. So, but because I was working so hard and because I was living in Shanghai, I started going out into the mountains of Tibet to go hiking for my vacations. So whenever the correspondents that I worked with would go back to the U.S. for their leave or whatever, I would go off to Tibet, and I had a friend, Brandon. We would go climbing in the mountains in Tibet. We'd do these 10 12, 14-day treks, really remote, find a Tibetan guy with some donkeys or some yaks, grab his wife to help cook. And we would just go out for days just with a tent and a sleeping bag. And then I was just sitting there with Brandon and being like, we need to like film this someday. And Brandon went off into another career, but I went and started filming these kinds of adventures, because you can't sit like, your story about being, sitting in the lake and the fireflies and the fire and seeing the silhouettes, like that's a end of day scene. Like that you have to fade to black and then start the next day with something, right? And I just got overwhelmed with wanting to tell these stories from these places. And then I just started doing it.
Yeah. I mean, but that's what you have to do, right? You just have to just start doing it.
Yeah.
And frankly, I mean, people think that that's what you have to do in order to get into the business. To me, that's what you have to do throughout your career.
Yeah.
It's not as though that ever ends. I mean, look at me now. I'm still just going out making things.
Yeah.
There is no other way.
No. And I think the funny thing is like, if people think like if you make one thing, you'll graduate into something else, and then someone else will do that other thing for you. And it's like, no, like you have to do every fucking thing every fucking day, no matter what. And I love this because I produce and direct and host my own shows, and I have a very small crew. I work with like one editor and a guy who makes some original music, and then 2 camera guys, and that's it. And so we would go out into the field. There's the 3 of us, and we just got used to, picking up the slack, carrying the tripods, charging batteries, doing all the things, just the 3 of us. And it was a beautiful kind of working relationship we had when we were out in the field dealing with other things that were really difficult and challenging. But yeah, you just have to get up every day and do the same thing.
Yeah, you do. And I mean, I think that I know that I got really used to working in television. Crews got bigger and bigger. Jobs got more and more segmented, especially when you went from like docu-reality to competition reality, where everybody has one job. And
competition reality is pretty intense though, because like how many cameras do you have on all these different contestants?
Yeah, I swore off show running competition reality in 2008. That was the last one I did, and I was like, never again. And everyone, you're sitting in a beach in Cabo trying to convince some famous person to show up to elimination because this is what their contract says, but also like the show is about them. And it's just too far away. For me, I was never in this business because television.
Mm-hmm.
I really couldn't care less about that sort of thing. I was in this business because I really want to tell stories. And I love the more sort of far-flung stories, the better for me. I love international stories, obviously, because of the travel, because of the background. But for me, it was never about making the prettiest picture or, winning an Academy Award, or it was never about any of these things. And so just getting out there and shooting something, doing it ourselves, not having so many people around, being able to connect with your subject, being able to actually follow somebody, being able to follow a story as opposed to having to write it all out ahead of time and outlining it for the network. Yeah. I love that kind of freedom, being able to find the story within the story, finding something authentic and then following that.
And getting paid to do it.
See, that is a dream.
It's the dream, yeah.
So when it comes to like competition reality, yeah, I couldn't find the spark for it anymore.
Fair enough. I mean, I can't watch that stuff anyway. So, I mean, and you were making it and looking at it every single day. Your mind must have just been blown.
And there comes a point at which you're like, I don't watch any of this stuff. Like, no one is going to hire me to make a dating show. Like, that is not something that I'm interested in. That is not something that I watch. Yeah. And so when you go to unscripted TV these days, that's all just, the legacy shows or some sort of competition show or something. That's great.
It's funny, like to this day, the most fun I've had making a TV show was Tough Rides China, which was my first show. And we went out not knowing how many episodes we were going to have, what was going to happen to us or anything. Like we had a route that was going to take us like 60 days around China. It was going to be like 18,000 kilometers, about 12,000 miles, and we just knew that crazy shit was going to happen to us all the time. And we had like a few things, like we had to meet this person. We went to this tourist site. We were doing a few things along the way that we knew we could like build segments around. But at the end of the day, we just had no idea what was going to happen on a daily basis. And the crazy shit that happened to us, and we filmed it because, we were ready for anything in those moments. And to have that, but we had that freedom because we self-financed it and sold it later. Like, it's like you said, like, you can't just get money from a broadcaster by saying you're going to go on a 60-day trip and crazy shit's going to happen to you and it's going to be awesome, but don't worry.
No one cares.
No one cares. It's true. Yeah, no one does care. It's it's brutal.
Yeah, I think those indie projects that one does, by far, I mean, it's the ones that you remember. It's the ones that touch your heart. I have that same thing too. The first film that I ever made was my senior year of university, called the Legacy Award, and it won some awards, and that's what started me getting my first job and things. And that was all just, it was about Vietnam War vets, of course. Obsessed.
In the U.S.?
In the U.S. Oh. And I was in Boston, and so I'd gone and I'd spoken to a vet who was the head of the VA there, and really it was, I don't even know what it was supposed to be at the beginning, just to look at Vietnam vets. God knows, it wasn't like developed story-wise, was I? But then I just remember thinking, like, this is all kind of boring, and I don't know, let's go to the war memorial, let's go to the wall, right? And I had a friend who was in print. And so one night I was like, let's drive to D.C. So you're in Boston. And she was like, okay. And we drove overnight to D.C. We got there in the middle of the night. We're like, oh, before we go to a hotel, so let's just go and check out the wall. Went and checked out the wall, got shots of the sun rising over the wall and things. And as we were doing it, we saw there was a guy there named Pyle who was selling POW and MIA paraphernalia, at one of the tents that they have by the memorial, and just started to get into conversation with him. And as I started to get into conversation, found that he was fascinating. I mean, he had lied about his age to go in as one of the first 2,500 advisors before the war technically began. He had won 2 Purple Hearts. His name was Hillbilly. He could not string together a grammatically correct sentence to save his life, and he was one of the most eloquent people I've ever met.
Amazing.
Yeah, and then he took me to the wall, and he showed me the people that he had lost. And in the end, the film really became a juxtaposition of these 2 very different men that I had randomly met. One who had put off going into the military for a semester. He was going to go to university, but he had been putting off university for a semester, and then he got drafted, and he said, okay, I can't go into the Army, put me in the Air Force. I don't want to see who I killed.
Right.
And then there was Paul, who was like, sign me up, put me in, I'm there. And then there are 2 very different stories and how they came out of it and their thoughts coming out of it. I mean, that is literally what the film became about. That is how you can just sort of find a film when you're doing it yourself.
Yeah.
If I had to outline that for somebody ahead of time, obviously that is not what I would have come up with.
No, and you would have never been at the memorial at 3 a.m. meeting random people to get a sunrise shot because you just decided to go there with your friend. Yeah, these moments are, the great moments of storytelling.
They are.
Where you just decide to do things randomly.
Yeah. I mean, there was, by other great love, like outside of the whole TV docs thing, right after 9/11, my friend Jenny and I decided to drive across the country, and sort of, we heard a lot about what people in big cities were saying because we were in LA and we were hearing all the major news and things, but we weren't really hearing what people in small towns across America were thinking. And so we set off to drive from LA to New York and stop in a different small town in a different state every day.
Yeah.
Find and every
Take
day.
the temperature.
Yeah. We would wake up, we'd go to a local diner, we would get a local paper, we would start reading, we would start talking to people, and it would lead us to some story. And a different story, obviously, in every place. Everything from like Mesa, Arizona, where a Sikh man was shot and killed outside of his gas station because he was wearing a turban, to, the kids in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, the 4th and 5th graders who were hiding under their desks when the plane went down. And so you had questions like, what do you tell the kids? Come out of there. We stopped at Ohio State. There just so happened to be
shooting.
I know. Thank God for that.
Yeah.
Christian man railing in the quad about the evils of Islam and spouting all kinds of hatred, but then watching the daughter of a Christian preacher, a Jewish guy, and a Palestinian girl all come together to be like, okay, we're not the issue.
Yeah.
We're the issue,
Yeah.
right? And then watching that conversation unfold on the campus and things. So, like, then being able to put together an independent film that sort of took the temperature of the country, and it all became connected with my voiceover. In the end, when we found the film in post, I had the most amazing editor who sat with all the footage, and I was working a normal job. Like, at the time, I was making a History Channel doc where I was interviewing U.S. presidents for a 2-hour special on their mother's influence on their lives and their presidencies and things. So I was like trying to do that, and then in the evening, go to this edit bay where the editor that I had hired had been working all day on this doc. And I remember I would just lie on a table like this, and he would just ask me questions, and I would just be exhausted. He was like, what were you thinking when? What were you feeling when? And through those conversations, really just finding the story. And it really became about this sort of unlocking of emotion of sort of when 9/11 happened. I felt numb, shut down, guilty for feeling numb. Everybody else is crying and upset, and I felt nothing. And I thought, oh my God, I'm a horrible person. But there's just so much to say. It was just so big. And then through speaking to people and going on this journey and hearing what everybody was saying and things slowly, and Jenny and I having our conversations, slowly unlocking that emotion and getting to it. And that was the evolution of the film in the end. But like being able to find that is just, that's a gift.
You said something great in there, which I don't think most people might not pick up on, but you said like finding it in post, like finding the story in post, like where you've gone out and covered all the bases, you've got it, but you can't script it and you don't know exactly where it is, and then having an editor sit with it, like with fresh eyes, because you've been staring at it and actually filming it for so many weeks or months. Yeah. That having someone come in with fresh eyes and help you like craft the narrative is so important. And it's such a nice way to like find the story in it. Yeah. Like we did that when I started making extreme treks. Again, I was like, I had to self-finance it as well, but I was like, okay, I'm gonna like walk 14 days around this holy mountain in Tibet, and it's 200 miles in 14 days, and we have no idea what we're gonna see or what's gonna happen to us, and we and then we filmed everyone we met. We filmed the camp, the mornings, the sunsets, the whole thing. We met people. We saw religious things. We got caught in storms, and then at the end we're just like, I think we got it. Like, I guess we got it, right? And then it's only when you sit down with someone who didn't experience any of that, and then they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is amazing. I can't believe you did this. And then I think sometimes when you're making stuff, you also get desensitized to like what people will find interesting who aren't there in the moment.
Yeah. Both. Also, you find some things more interesting in the moment, then you get back and see them and you're like, oh yeah, that was not actually that fascinating. Yeah. We call it field vision.
Field vision, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that for me, finding things post is my forte. It is my first love.
Right.
I love it. I directed most of what I show ran in reality mainly because I had to. Mainly because I just wanted to get the right things, but I did not love it. I like to direct. Mostly I like to direct docs. Directing reality is stressful because you just know you've got all these points you have to hit, and you're on a schedule and you're moving really fast, and you are, it's just very stressful.
It's very intense, yeah.
It is very intense, and especially if you're not loving the product, then it just feels like hard work.
Harder work. Yeah.
Whereas when you're out and you're making a doc and you're just getting invested in people's lives and you're asking questions, and then that does not feel hard work to me. It's still exhausting. At the end of the day, you come back and your brain is exhausted, right? But it has been, I lose time, I lose hours. And then all of a sudden you look up. That's the same way in the edit bay, when all of a sudden you're starting to get into a story and you're feeling it and you're like, oh, I see this, see what's coming together. And then you can lose time again.
I'm very interested to go back. So when you finished your time in Boston, you said, you were very interested in journalism and war journalism. Did you visit any other hotspots while you were out there traveling around the world?
No, I didn't really, other than my time. I mean, obviously I went through Africa. And then I traveled through Southern Africa too. So I traveled a lot.
You must have seen some things.
Yeah, I mean, Africa's my first life. Africa is where my passion project Emergent now is all based too. And so I will come back to it. I will get that film made eventually. But yeah, after I did that, when I came back to Boston for my final semester of university and made that film, The Legacy of War, then that's sort of when I went back to England. That's how I got hired for things. And then, yeah, that's how I started my career.
Yeah. But did you ever film in a war environment at all? Did you ever have that chance to pursue that goal after being right on the edge of that whole Rwanda genocide?
No, I never ever have. And I ended up going back to England, and I had some great mentors who were war doc producers. David Pilger's films, John Pilger's films by David Monroe were some of my favorites, like Year Zero, especially a lot of Southeast Asian docs. And I got to meet them and work with them in London, which was great.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I never got to be in the middle of a war zone again. And then by the time that I got older, and I was like, oh, do I still have the death wish?
The death wish, yes, exactly.
I don't know that I do.
Yeah.
I think I might have grown up a bit.
Yeah. I was never in a war zone, but in 2008, there was a massive earthquake in central China right before the Olympics. So everyone was, it's funny, it's not funny, but it's a strange coincidence of timing and events where everyone was in China in like May, June, July of 2008 doing stories about China because everyone was building up to the Olympics, which was August 8th, 2008. And then in May 2008, we had this massive earthquake where like hundreds of thousands of people died. Officially, it was 88,000 people, but that's not even close. But I remember like being on the ground quite soon after that. We were there for the New York Times, and I was shooting for Newsweek and a few other people. And that was horrific, just seeing like all the damage and the death and the people and stuff like that. I was like, and then I think it was that moment where I was like, I definitely could never exist or operate in a war zone, because even just a natural disaster zone was just too much. Like it was too emotional. And it was too difficult to focus on work or even try to like tell stories in some cases. It was really hard for me.
Yeah. I mean, it also brings up a lot of different emotions, right? When you try to turn off thought or emotion for a second in order to capture things, I remember when we were at the Rwandan refugee camp, and the doctors were worried because they had seen a boy the day before who had sort of massive hole in his leg, and they had treated it and told the mother that to bring him back soon so that they could change it. But of course, people don't go back to doctors often, especially in those refugee camps, because people die when they go to the doctor, and it's hugely frightening. And they were worried that he wasn't going to come back. Anyway, while I was there, he did come back. The mother brought it back, and it took 10 people altogether to hold down this 8-10-year-old boy as they were working on his leg, which was badly infected, and they were trying to save it. And as I was taking photos of all of this, I just remembered the look on the mother's face as she looked at me. It wasn't that she was so angry, but it was more just questioning.
Yeah, why are you photographing my son's torment? And it's like, well, it's part of this. It's part of the story. Having to make that kind of recognition of like, this is part of the story. I have to turn this part of my brain off in order to tell the story, because that's my job.
Mm-hmm.
That can be really hard.
That is hard. Yeah, I will never forget her face. Yeah, but
that's the shit that sticks.
It's for a long, long time.
Yeah.
But in the end, if you get the story, you just got to tell. I tell myself with some of these harder shoots, getting the story out there is so incredibly important. And of course, with people here, when you're talking about some very difficult subjects, whether it's abuse or whatever it is that you're interviewing people about, I mean, they're there because they want to get the message out. They want to reach other people, right? And so you give people their space and time to tell their story as they want to tell their story. And you capture that, and then hopefully you can get the word out there.
Yeah, and just kind of educate people, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's been a big thing for me. I remember is just wanting to make like content and tell stories that help like educate people. Like this part of the world looks like this. This part of the world has this kind of religion. This is what the customs of these people are like. This is what they believe in. This is how they, interact with people from foreign countries like me. This is, how they treat their friends. This is where they sleep, and building this kind of educational narrative to the content. And I think that's what ended up getting my shows on BBC and stuff like that, because it was very much not like I'm gonna show you how to survive in this situation. It was just like me going out to learn about how these people already do this in a difficult environment, and they're going to take me on this journey. And it was kind of more of the humility of the storytelling and the educational aspects of my shows, I think, which was kind of helpful for the direction they went in anyways.
Yeah, and you can be the viewer.
Yeah, you can, right? And that's it, instead of just trying to shove a narrative down everyone's throat.
It's really nice, isn't it?
It is incredible. It is. So have you given up on the war correspondent dream?
Yeah, I don't have the urge to be in the middle of war zones anymore.
Sean Penn just finished something in Ukraine, I think. He's coming out with a documentary in Ukraine. I think I read that somewhere.
I think what I was always attracted to in a war zone, more than the danger of the war zone itself and things, is the fact that you will tell just very authentic stories. Yes, are there places that I would love to get into to tell a couple of stories? Yes, that I physically can't because it's dangerous? Absolutely. I mean, I remember trying to get into the diamond mines back in the early 2000s when I was friends with a bunch of Navy SEALs who I was saying, all right, so if we put a team together, could we go in? We'd be posed as this. Could you get us into? And they were all like, no, we'll all die.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. It's wild. I think too, like the story of what's happening in war is hugely important, but the story of whose lives are being affected and how is something that we don't get enough of. I mean, I find it especially interesting in this Ukraine Russia conflict that we've got now. Like, I think just a few days ago was the 2-year anniversary, right? So President Zelensky of Ukraine came out and said, oh, we've had 31 fatalities, since the war broke out. But I'm just thinking, like, how many of those stories like really haven't been told? Like, how is this affecting the families? Like, when you think about it, if this war keeps going for much longer, and it probably will, an entire generation of men will have been drafted on both sides of the war and die on both sides of the war. And it's just like, what are the stories of the wives that are being left behind, the children that are being left behind that aren't going to grow up with their fathers, right? Because it's majority of the people fighting are male. What women are taking up arms. Like, there's a lot of kind of, I think at the beginning there was quite a lot of interest, and we were getting a lot of like stories about what was going on. And I think since the fighting has kind of slowed down a little bit, or kind of gotten stuck in this, northern part of Ukraine, in the eastern side, I think, it's been harder for journalists to get in and tell like meaningful stories. And I think like we're at a huge disadvantage because of that.
I mean, but at least we do have social media these days, which is huge, right? Something that we never had before was actually being able to get people, when they can, get their stories out. For sure.
But I've always worried about like the authenticity of some citizen journalism, and I think that skepticism was built up quite heavily from me, like living in China for so many years, because where the Chinese government will just pay a whole bunch of bloggers to go out and tell their narrative. And then of course that shows up in social media. And I grew up in the day and age when like being a journalist meant something, and now it doesn't. Like, a blogger or a Instagrammer or a YouTuber is now doing the work of journalists, but actually the integrity, the storytelling, building and cultivating a network of of people, to feed you information and to deliver truth, basically. Like that is all kind of gone by the wayside. And now we have, citizen Instagrammer, citizen YouTuber, but the authenticity of some of those stories I find pretty questioning. So coming out of and especially with the propaganda twist, like the Russians are as insane with propaganda as the Chinese, crafting every narrative to fit their usage. And there isn't any kind of debating both sides going on at any level.
Yeah.
So this is a little bit concerning for me when I'm turning on social media in order to learn about what's going on.
Yeah. Well, the state of journalism today is a whole.
Yeah, there's a reason why we're both not in it. Actually, every single person that I worked with at the New York Times is pretty much out of the New York Times. Like they all moved on at some stage, because I think that paper kind of went a little wonky to the left.
What do you think that, what do you think that, what have most of them gone to?
A lot of them gone on, they're still writing, but a lot of them went into academia. I mean, it's the same for photography. Like I was working actively as a photojournalist, documentary photographer from 2002 to 2012, which is when I took kind of my last assignment and then walked away and then started making TV full time. And all of the class of photographers that I kind of grew up with, we were all quite friendly. They've all moved on because you couldn't make a living really anymore doing what we were doing, which was kind of documentary storytelling. Like you either had to move into doing corporate work full time. All of us were doing corporate work on the side, but you either had to move into corporate work full time or like go into fashion or something like that, or jump into Instagram. But actually, I had an entire photography career where I started and finished my photography career before Instagram was even a thing.
Right.
Yeah. So now, and I remember doing my first assignments like for the New York Times in film, right?
Yeah.
Before digital cameras were reliable enough, to that you would take it out and that was crazy back in the day. Developing film and then scanning it.
Beta and I cut my first doc myself, reel to reel. Like
that's a great story. Yeah.
And then you'd have to start all over, and you'd be like,
yeah. That's the real deal, is when you're cutting. Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous, right? When you think about it, thank God we're not doing that anymore.
No. Have you seen this postcards from Earth at the Sphere in Las Vegas?
No.
So Darren Aronofsky, Academy Award nominated director. He didn't win, I don't think, but he did like Black Swan, and he did a whole bunch of things. So he did this 60-minute. It's an experience. It's not, but it's a film about how we have to leave Earth, to find other planets, and what and it kind of goes through our entire evolution on Earth. And they used these like 16K cameras, which shoot in like 5 or 6 different directions in order to fill the whole like LCD screen in the sphere. So when you're sitting there, the story is in front of you, but it's also above you and kind of off to the side. And I was in Vegas on the weekend, and I saw it, and it was absolutely spectacular. It was probably one of the most visually stunning things I've ever seen in my life.
Really?
Yeah. Incredibly impressive. And just again, to show you like how the technology has changed so much. Like maybe 10 years ago, you couldn't even imagine, something like that. But with the advent of digital and the bigger sensors and, 4K coming in and then getting everyone used to this, but these 16K cameras, if you go on YouTube, you can find some behind the scenes stuff of this, which was bigger than this table. It was incredible, but definitely worth it.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. And the because I was a nature guy, so we were always out in the mountains and in the deserts, and they spend a lot of time like filming in literally the most beautiful places in the world.
Experiential events have just gotten better and better and better.
I think so. And there's money for them too, right? Because people don't want just consumer goods. Like I think people should, want to have experiences that educate them and change their lives.
Yes. The brands want people to show up in real life.
Yeah. So how's it been for you, like transitioning from, wanting to get into war journalism to then making a documentary about war veterans to then moving into competition reality TV, and then continuing to do docs, and now being kind of totally immersed in documentary brand work?
Well,
it's a hell of a journey.
it's a bit of a weird one because I sort of started out here and then I was like, well, let's see what it's like if I go into it now. Like, for me, the first thing was always mastering production. Mastering production so that you could create different workflows and systems for every project that's based on project that allows for the greatest sort of flexibility of creativity, right?
Well, that's where you get your freedom from, right? Like if you know how to make shit, you're free to do it anytime. So yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Yes. And it's sort of what we like to call the production architecture, right? Like becoming an architect in production, yes, you can use this is usually used when we're talking about something in design or in technology, a back-end system or something that people are going to be an architect of. People don't understand how much architecture goes into production itself. And the more that you can set things up efficiently, and with these smaller teams too, which is key, the faster you can move, the more flexible you can be, and the greater product that you can make. And sort of if I thought that I had a superpower, it would be like, especially in the advertising brand world now, it is taking a big project and being able to break it down into its component parts, figure out the best way to structure staff, the workflow, the systems in order to create this thing, whatever it is this thing is, right? So for me, that all started when I was in production as a showrunner. I became a showrunner when I was 26 because the person who was running the show left and the production company was just like, can you just do it?
Here you go.
And I was like, yeah, totally. Of course I can. And I was like,
I've done this a million times. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you really faked it till you made it. That's everyone has one of these great stories. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But as long as you have I had a strong basis and foundation in structure and storytelling and knowing how to write and things. And so yeah, that's where it all started for me. So then I was showrunning for almost a dozen years before going into the network side. And frankly, when I was first asked to join the network, I was like, oh, hell no, I'm not going to the dark side. To me, those were like the suits on the dark side that I didn't really want to be.
And so many terrible conversations with them folk who I've interviewed a few of it, but we're building bridges again.
I get it.
Yeah.
I know, just too often what I found in network execs was just that they had grown up within a network.
Yeah.
So they just haven't made any.
Box thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But at first I was like, oh, hell no. But then I was like, all right, I'll come in for a couple of months. Let's see how it goes. And I did. And then I was like, wait, what? The first time that I went to my boss and I was like, hey, we should make a presentation about this. And he was like, okay, how much money do you need? And I was like, wait, what?
Exactly. Yeah.
So we can just do it? And he was like, yeah. That was really exciting. And I was like, oh.
You became one of the gatekeepers.
Just so crazy, right?
Yeah.
Especially someone who's such a hardcore production person. And there just weren't a lot of us who were showrunners that had gone in at that time. Now there's a lot more, thank God.
You would have had a very unique perspective working on the broadcast side, you know, with your dozen years of working in production, knowing how to learn production, and then going into, you know, because when budgets come at you, when timelines and schedules come at you, you know what's bullshit and what's not. I mean, that's a huge skill. Like everyone that works for a broadcast network should have a few years in production so that they know what's what.
Yeah. So when a schedule is coming to you and they're saying, oh, they can get you the show, it's going to take this long to shoot, and you can actually sort of work out the schedule in your mind and think, well, that seems a bit long, or that seems a bit short. I think you need more time, you know, and that was the exciting part too, being able to do that. Or having production management come and say, they think that they need more money for this. And I was like, oh, wait, that's up to me?
Yeah.
I mean, like, give them the money. Or, you know, learning, to me, it was like, it if you had already gotten your master's in production, going into a network was like getting your PhD, because you got to know how the deals are made, why the precedents are set, what they will do, what they won't do. The amount of time that I spent in lawyers' offices when I was at the network, just saying, like, tell me why.
Why can't we do this?
And when? Oh, how does that work? When's that decision made? Who makes that? You know? And then just getting to find out exactly how it's all put together. So that was super fun. But after 2 years, we got changed, as Viacom often does. They'll switch up the networks and things. And we were changed from a unscripted network to a scripted network.
Oh, wow. That's not a big difference at all. That's easy, right?
And not at all something that I ever wanted to do, right? Like, that was never in my vision of things. Documentary, unscripted, it was never. There's a bunch of people in unscripted when I started who were very much in unscripted to get a leg, earn some money, get a foothold, and get hired to direct something.
Yeah.
That's all.
Because that's where the money is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was never my.
What do you watch versus what you make? So I'm curious, because I make documentary television shows, but I don't watch a lot of documentaries. Like, I almost, because I just don't have a lot of time. I travel a lot, so the majority of the stuff I watch is scripted.
It's funny. I do watch docs. I love watching docs. I find that the only unscripted series and things that I will watch are more sort of doc-based unscripted series. But even stuff like Apple's TV, Apple TV series Home. Have you watched that?
No, I haven't watched this yet. Yeah.
Now, HGTV, not necessarily my bad. Apple TV Home, absolutely. That is a fascinating look at these. Each episode is a different home. It is made so incredibly well. It is shot so incredibly well. I think it's fascinating.
That level of Apple branding is carrying on through its content creation, because there's been some incredible, stuff made on that network, and they've done it at a really high level. From Newsroom to Ted Lasso to even the stuff they've done around the football and Messi and the Major League Soccer, because they did a bunch of MLS docs and Messi docs and Miami stuff, and it's all been fantastic.
Yeah,
I do watch sports docs, actually.
There's
sportsman.
Sports docs, there's music docs, and there's crime docs. Mm-hmm. That's about all that you're going to find. Other than your pop culture, like the Bling Ring or the Tinder Swindler, or something that's like. But even those.
Have you watched Dubai Bling?
I did watch a second of it. Yeah.
I was having a very dark moment one night, and I think I popped it on and watched an episode, and it was pretty painful.
Yeah, I swear, what I saw, I was like, oh my God, they finally did it. The number of shows, even in 2017, that were being pitched around there and things, because there was so much money coming out of there, and it was so blingy that everybody was like, oh, this is perfect for reality shows. But a lot of people, like, they didn't get it off the ground for a long time.
Well, a lot of rich people in Dubai don't want to be filmed because they've.
That makes sense.
Yeah, fair enough. It's not like in the United States where everyone wants to be known, right? Or to have that kind of people in Dubai who are there with money, they're low profile.
Yeah, we don't need soccer.
No.
Yeah, so it was just saw a minute of that, and I was like, oh, so they did it. Got it. Noted.
What's the most aggressive production schedule you've ever been on, from concept to delivery? I'm really curious about this, because you seem like someone who's got a lot of experience.
They just kept getting shorter and shorter. There was in the advertising world or the brand world? Or the TV world?
TV world. I'm really curious, because I had to do 10 hours, 10 46-minute episodes, and I had 18 months. From concept to delivery, and I had to deliver the first batch deliver the first 5 after 10 months of production, and then I had to deliver the next 5 at the term, which was the 18-month limit, and that was pretty intense from concept to production to post-production to delivery.
This is actually right before I went into the network. I went into CMT at Viacom. Jason Dinsmore, the head of CMT.
What's CMT?
It was Country Music television
Okay.
by a common station with CMT and VH1 and MTV when like the music group for the longest time. And I remember I got the call on April 14th. I can't remember. I can't believe that I remember the exact date, but I had to start on April 4th. I got a call from the network exec who was like, hey, I just got the sizzle reel. There are these 4 girls in Texas. We want 8 1 hours. It is April 14th. We need to get you on a plane to go there now. And if you could staff up within a couple of days, we need to start airing the first episode in July. So I had 3
Jesus.
to get the concept, go out there, meet the girls, like find the location, where are they all going to live, what is this all going to be, what's it all going to be about. And it was just 20-hour days during the 4 weeks of shooting nonstop. And then
8 1 hours in 4 weeks of shooting.
8 1 hours. I had to get a rough cut out and post on a 1-hour episode in 6 days.
Holy cow. That's insane.
Having 6 different editors trying to bring it all into line with the top line editor who would then it was insane. And then air it week after week. And you are just literally delivering right up to the day that you're airing it and things.
Were you guys all at least in the same post-production studio, or were you all like all around the place, like all around the world, or
Oh no. We were all in LA. It was for a major production company here.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's good. At least you guys were all in the same room. That's helpful.
Yeah, no, it had to be, because we had to bring, like, I would have to have Jason come into the edit bay, watch this, make sure you're okay with it. Great, let's lock this. Let's move on and things. And then soon after that, they were like, you want to just come in-house? Then my first things were fixing things, going into edit bays and fixing things for the network, whatever they had commissioned.
Before they gave you the impossible task of turning around 8 hours in 3 months.
We did it, though.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. Like, he must have signed up a sponsor for that concept, right? And then, no?
No, it was just the beginning of trying to build a network, and we needed to get some originals on air, and he wanted it on. But then, and so, this happens a lot when there's a slot open, and they're like, okay, so this is our air date. This is what we have to hit. And that's why when things just became, hey, I don't mind doing really fast turnaround things.
Yeah.
I mean, I just did a Meta brand launch at the end of last year for their AI personas on Instagram and Facebook. And it was a matter of weeks between starting and launching. So things can move really, really fast. I don't mind that because I can work 20 hours a day I know what my limit is. I can work for 20 hours a day, 7 days a week at 100% capacity for the first 2 weeks, 90% capacity at that 3rd week.
Just diminishing slowly. Yeah.
It's exponentially
dropping. Yeah. Until you're in comatose, like week 7.
The 4th week, you're like, I'm not exactly trusting everything that's coming out of my mouth.
Yeah. And if you're running that whole production or you're running that whole event, yeah, that's a big deal.
But I sort of like that. That's one of I love deadlines and pressure. I'm best in that sort of environment. So I don't mind that. And again, if you can work out the production architecture so that you can make the rest of it actually flow, then that is key. I mean, for me, I often feel like my job in a situation like that is set up the workflow so that it all works really, really well. Hire the right people who you trust, who are smart, who can do their jobs. And then my job is basically to run ahead of them, like clearing all the obstacles, right? So that they can just keep doing their jobs without having to worry about any of that. And then they can put out the best product that they possibly can. And then I can clear the way for them and then troubleshoot anything and get in there and creatively solve anything that needs to be solved. So, I don't know, in the gigs these days, especially in the short turnaround ones, it's very often just a matter of how well you set it up at the beginning is how well it's going to come out at the end.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I was filming the series Expedition Asia, where we were doing all this crazy stuff in Asia, and I had an editor and a post-production supervisor here in LA, and he was a young kid out of NYU that I really trusted. and brought him along for, he was doing part-time work for me for a few years, and gave him this series to work on. And we kind of set up like, okay, when would be the dates for your first rough cuts? And then, but he was in LA and I was in Asia. So we had this great time difference. And it was amazing because, I would be looking at rough cuts like a day or two before going back out into the field. So I would get a rough cut, I'd make notes on it, send it back to him, go out into the field for 2 weeks, deliver him more content, get, the fine cut back, go through that, and then go into the studio, do voiceover work, and then, look at another rough cut, make notes on it, go back out into the field. So we had this really nice kind of schedule to it. And it ended up being so smooth and so kind of effortless. Like when you put those in place and you've got like the right people that you actually trust to help you bring it through. Because no one knows like how this stuff gets made.
No.
They just see the end result and they either like it or they don't. But the process can either be absolutely beautiful or completely miserable. and it's 100% up to people and organization.
It is. Yeah. It absolutely is. I mean, I've been very, very lucky in my career to have worked with some outstanding people and have a great roster of people that I can pull from, and they pull me in at times. And so
how hard was it as a freelancer or as someone who's kind of independently employed during COVID? Because I really feel like I obviously have a lot of friends who are in the creative industry, musicians, artists, storytellers, everything. And it's amazing like how many people just got completely wiped out during COVID and had to take full-time jobs that they didn't necessarily want or didn't necessarily feed their creative passions just in order to kind of make it through. And a lot of them actually haven't come back into the creative space since then, which has been really hard. And a lot of my former colleagues, because I had a production company, and at one stage I think we had about 6 or 7 people pretty much working full-time for years, same crew. And half of them have, actually all of them have had to go and take like other jobs that have been a little bit not the happiest thing for them, but they haven't been able to come back, which I think has been really hard. I was just curious if you had any experiences about that.
Well, I think that perhaps my experience was a little bit different because just before COVID, I had actually sort of switched more into the advertising world.
Oh, and that ramped up during COVID.
Definitely was affected at the beginning, and everything stopped too. But basically for me, once I left E1, I really wanted to take some time and figure out what I wanted to make again. I had spent my entire career, whether I was a showrunner or a buyer, a network exec or a development exec, I'd spent my entire career sort of shaping and developing things for so-and-so's audience, right? So it was always about fitting into this bucket, this audience, this network, whatever it was.
But you were still making your own stuff during that time, right? Like you were making a doc in the evenings when you were working as a showrunner for something on History Channel. Like, did you keep making
a showrunner?
Yeah.
When I went into the network, I wasn't making anything on my own. I couldn't because I was a full-time employee of Viacom.
Was that in the contract that you can't go off and make like your own stuff, or was that just something because you were working so hard?
No, if you want to make something on your own outside of your like actual work and things, that would definitely be something that I would have to go to my boss and say, hey, I want to do this, and then see what they said. But yeah, otherwise you're not to just.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I've never worked for a broadcast.
And then say when you're a development exec, right? Because your development mind is supposed to be there.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be developing for that company.
Not developing your best stuff for yourself,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I've worked with a lot of different organizations and people that would reach out and want to develop things, whether it's stuff like the Explorers Club or.
I love the.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry to break it. Yeah, I love that. That building in New York City is spectacular. I've done a lot of events there.
Never been there. I know. I've been invited to a couple of things there. And
just the history in that building is out of this world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry for that tangent, but the Explorers Club is something quite special.
No, yeah. I know. I've always wanted to. I mean, we have talked about a number of different things. Haven't gotten anything off the ground with them yet, but definitely interested in them. I love all the technology stuff too. So anything, we were developing something with NASA. We were developing, especially when I was at Grizzly. When I left E1, I was like, I just need to figure out what I want to make outside of all of the networks and what's wanted and what's in the zeitgeist and blah, 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 blah. What do I want to see? And then that sort of opened up the floodgates for me because like we talked about before, like reality was never my bag. It was never like, oh, I cannot wait to see the next episode of Real Housewives. That was never my thing.
I don't know if anyone would actually admit to dying to see the next episode of Real Housewives. Yeah.
And so, yeah, once I started, then I had some friends who worked in the advertising world. They were like, hey, why don't you talk to some friends over at Shy at Day? They were like, oh, we're actually starting a production company. Or they had started it a year before or so. And so come in and talk to us about developing docs and entertainment for their brand clients. And so that's when I really got into my heyday of like, oh, I love development. Like, this is super fun. And we were developing for all of these brands. So we developed pitches for everybody from like AMD to Robinhood to what else? Jeep and Corona. And we were just whoever we could. And we were swinging for the fences and coming up with big ideas. Because obviously they wanted things that would make waves too for brands and that would make a splash when they're pitching.
I've definitely done a few pitches for Jeep back in the day. Yeah,
of course.
Trying to do some outdoor adventure stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, for me, that was when I really started to be like, this is the future and this is what I love. And then COVID hit and Omnicom owned Grizzly. They shut that down. And then I sort of went, wait, why do I keep developing things for other people? I should probably just do this for myself. And so that's why then I went over into developing my own docs for brand clients, taking what I had learned about what was important to brands, what kind of packages I could put together, what kind of perks that one could put in the packages, the strategy behind the doc and things. And one could sort of get all of that together. And then someone was like, and then do you want to just EP this launch of, like, yeah, sure. And so then I started to do more of that. And then that's how I got into doing all of the advertising production and then also developing the docs. And now for me, I love it because, you know, you develop a doc and sell it. That's great. But I want to be in production. I want to always be keeping my hand in. I want to always be keeping my mind going. So like being able to freelance on the advertising stuff and keep a hand in that quick production. Also getting to know the social world inside and out for how you can develop and produce for it. To me, that's all invaluable and I loved it.
Yeah.
And also advertising is fast.
It is fast. Yeah. Quick turnarounds.
I love it.
I've really enjoyed like the few brand experiences I've had. Like I'm a watch ambassador for Glauchute Original, which is one of the Swatch brands. They're based in Germany, so they're great. And you're part of that today.
Nice.
But I've always loved it because you know, putting these deals together, figuring out like how to get the exposure. I remember doing I did Tough Rides Brazil with BMW, and it was great because like, you know, they gave me a bike, they gave me some production budget, but then, you know, then because I was also in the show and not just the showrunner, like I am like, we had, they wanted me to come out to Germany to do some events. And then there was also like a speaking tour that was attached to it. And it was all kind of included in the budget as a way of like putting the whole thing together so that I would do the project and then promote the project afterwards instead of just like locking it down and letting it go to broadcast. And so once it went to broadcast, then we were doing events kind of all around the world with them. And promoting the show while people could actually watch it and stuff like that. And of course, you got clips and pictures and, you know, great adventure. And it was a really difficult trip and the bike looked great and everything like that. And I love being able to put all that together and then be able to speak about it and connect with audiences like in person. That was always an important part. Like the speaking and the live event stuff was always the most fun because you get to talk about, you know, using that product in, you know, some of the worst conditions in the world or something like that. And it was always a great way to connect with the audience.
And were you doing these speaking events at events that the brand had put on, or were they events especially for screenings for the film?
So it was a bit of mix of both. So I would do like motorcycle dealerships owned by BMW, but then I was also doing other events privately where they, you know, people would ask me like, what have you done recently? I was like, oh, I did this motorcycle trip in Brazil, and they asked me to come and talk about it. And then also 2 Fortune 500 companies. Like I used to do a lot of speaking before COVID for them. And they would obviously come in and ask me, like, talk about something really difficult you've done, or working in small teams, or working under tight deadlines, or reinventing yourself, to better the team. Like when the team needs something, you have to step up and learn it, and then maybe try to do, like, they have a few like little themes. And of course, when you're doing like a 60-day motorcycle trip through the Amazon jungle in Brazil, all of these things come together in some way. So you're able to, show the product, but also talk about the experience and that. So it was a mix of, doing an event at the Explorers Club, doing an event at BMW Manhattan, doing an event at, UPenn, in their South American politics class or whatever, just being able to show people different audiences, what experiences you can have in different parts of the world. So I was doing that.
So you've reinvented yourself a number of times too.
I have, yeah. It's been insane. Every 10 years, my entire career gets flipped on its head. I don't know what's going on.
How's this one going?
This one's going okay. Like, I think so I went to China. So just to give you a bit of my background, I played Division I basketball in Canada. So I was an athlete from the age of like 6 to the age of 22. And I didn't do anything other than sports. Like, I had zero interest in anything. You're totally one-dimensional. But then when my career ended and I wasn't able to play professionally or for Team Canada, which was a goal, then I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. So then I went to China. So I went to China when I was 22. And I didn't know who I was or what I wanted or whatever. I just knew that I needed to be someplace different to like figure it out. So I went to China, and then I was like, oh my God, like I just wanted to tell stories about China. Like, this whole thing grew up inside of me and replaced my sporting career. And it was something I didn't even know was there. But I was in China, and I was like, oh my God, I want to tell the story of all these people to, English-speaking people that I can reach around the world. So I started writing, I started taking pictures, then I started working for local magazines, then I started working for Asian magazines, then I started working for international US English-speaking magazines. And that's how I got in with the New York Times and stuff like that. And then Lehman Brothers killed print publishing totally, and then I moved into TV, and then COVID has put me into a bit of a hiatus with television. But now coming back to LA, getting back into TV, also doing this. And actually, I'm going to build out a live show. Yeah, like a little 1 hour, like adventure, a night of adventure or something like that, where I can come out and talk about my career and the different things I've done and things like that. And kind of the way a stand-up comedian would go on tour and visit different cities around the country. Because I did a cross-country tour in 2017 with an agent. He arranged 22 speaking events in 28 days from New York to San Diego. It was a tour that a lot of like young adventurers did back in the day, some photographers as well. And you go to country clubs, you go to universities, you go to some of them were just high school theaters that opened up to the public and charged everyone like $5 or something. Anyways, you get a couple grand for each event, so it was a good. But I loved it because you get to meet so many interesting people and so many different people, obviously from one coast to another, and everyone in the middle. And all of them just had a totally different take on what they were watching, like the whichever adventure show I would talk about that evening. And it was spectacular. So I really want to try to like recreate that experience for myself, where I can go out on, Fridays and Saturdays and do 2 shows a night and bring people into a world that's far away from this world. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So this is the new phase, is it?
I think so, yeah. I'm still figuring it out. But COVID was a bit of a shell shock because I mean, I was making, like I said, in 2019, I did 10 episodes and 42 speaking events, right? And then COVID hit, so I couldn't make any TV and I couldn't do any speaking. So I just sat around for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got a cat out of it.
You got it. So it's not nothing.
Yeah, but the reinvention is real, like, because
and you have to lean into whatever your strengths are, right? Like, whatever makes you unique in this world. We all are, whether it's what we make. What I love about this world now is that so much of it relies upon your taste. And
a lot of it, yeah.
I welcome that. I think that is,
if you've got good taste, yeah, it's better.
Picking projects has been the good part for me. So I think I know what is actually good, at least when it comes to storytelling. Storytelling wins every single time.
Yeah. And you've had such a variety of experiences too. Like you're a go-to person for you're a taste master, like in a lot of ways, because you've seen it from so many different angles. That's the thing that's impressive.
I guess that depends upon who you're asking, really. That, yeah, for me, I straddle those two worlds of television and filmmaking, and then advertising and brand content. And so that's my forte, and that's what I lean into, is being able to connect these two worlds, being able to understand these two worlds, and produce within them. Yeah, COVID has been super tough. COVID has meant that and it's been more than COVID, right? Because of COVID, all of these companies ended up consolidating, and everybody ends up buying each other. You got to be big in order to survive in this brave new world, blah, blah, blah. And so the number of buyers just diminishes and diminishes until it's really sad what's happened to the unscripted industry. I mean, and it's not just here, it's in England too.
Oh, yeah. And in Singapore, everywhere. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, this media consolidation hit everywhere. And then when the strike happened and everybody thought, oh, so you guys are having a hard time because of the strike. And you're like, oh, no. Our hard time started a year ago, when nobody bought from the biggest companies, for 18 months. When I was talking to huge international broadcos who I have known and worked with for decades, and them being like, yeah, we have nothing in pre-production or production for the first time ever.
Yeah.
And it's hard for everybody, right?
It is. And the thing that people don't understand is, like, when you're running a production company, the key to keeping that production company going is deal flow, right? Because you're using profits on one production to bankroll, the initial pre-production stage of something else until you can get that money to come in, right? So you're constantly, in order to be able to make one thing and then go into the next thing, you need to be working on them at the same time, and you need to have money coming in from other projects all the time in order to keep it going. And what happened in COVID was it all just stopped. And it's like having to, start pushing the wheel up the hill again, like from a standing position, which has been brutal.
Except for the fact that the hill is moved, right?
And it's way bigger.
And it's way bigger. Nothing is coming back. It's funny. I had lunch with my old boss, and we were both just musing about the fact that, like, when we were at the network together, like, those days are gone. Like,
everyone's just working from home.
Well, it's not just like working in person, or not just the way that networks work and the amount of content being bought and the number of buyers and the audiences. Like, it's all changed, right? And so we're never going to go back in time. There's a brave new world out there, and we all have to adjust and move forward as we do and find our niche in it and things. But yeah, it's different, and it's never going back again. And we've lost a lot of really, really amazing, talented people in our industry who have had to leave and go to others. And, COVID meant that a lot of people also moved out of places like LA, right? Because you could work remotely, and all of a sudden you didn't have to pay the enormous prices here. And if you have a family, you could now move to the Midwest and still edit your shows and still earn your same living editing your shows. And that went a lot further.
It did.
Right?
Yeah, that was huge.
So people got to move out, which was great. But then after that, hopefully they can take their skills and, turn that into something locally, because the industry didn't come back in LA. There just aren't as many jobs. That's just the way it's going to go. It's only going to get more intense as you can do more and more with AI as well. And so there's going to be more and more people there's going to be less and less need for shoots in general.
Yeah, I believe so, yeah. And versions of scripts and rewrites and all this kind of stuff.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Yes, there are things that are going to be automated. That means that there are going to be less jobs for some things, and there are going to be less shoots. So that affects everybody, trucking, catering, and everybody, and that is all really sad. And there's a big change that's happening, and everybody's having to adjust. For the documentary world, it also gives us some flexibility. as people who don't have a lot of money all the time.
Yeah, no, it's true.
It can add value and things, but nothing's going to replace that creative mind.
Let's hope.
Not
yeah,
now.
not yet.
I mean, wait for that. But all in good time. But right now, there's still taste matters. Knowing what is good matters still.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess it matters now more than ever if you can do everything on your own.
Well, yeah, because then you have the freedom to tell people to fuck off because you're going to go do something on your own. And I think that's a huge bargaining chip. Like, if you can go out and make stuff on your own and someone's trying to hire you to do something, like then you're always just kind of gambling between, oh, well, if you don't pay me this or give me this much freedom to tell this story, I'm just going to go and make this on my own because I've already done that. I have a whole career of this doing and I'm doing fine. So yeah, step up and give me the freedom I need, or I'm just going to go and find it elsewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, that part is nice. And the fact that equipment's so accessible and
cheap now.
And cheap.
Yeah.
So cheap.
Yeah. Drones are like $600, $700. Yeah, it's amazing. And that I can't even tell you. There's someone I'm trying to get on my podcast now who's a professional drone pilot and like films and television. And but I was trying to get him on because I just want to do a whole thing about how much aerial photography has changed, because it completely changed my entire career. Because like in 2010 and 2012, when I did Tough Rides China and Tough Rides India, we didn't have drones. So everything was shot at ground level, which was good. But, you had to set up the tripod down the highway and then, turn around on the highway. Yeah, driving shots and then turn and pass through. But now, the guys can go up ahead, pull off, throw a drone up, follow you for a couple miles or a couple kilometers, turn around, get all these different, and you don't even know where the thing is. And your DOP or your aerial guy is just getting it done. And it changed. And of course, being able to see the landscape and see the motorcycle go through, or see you walking or hiking or climbing, it's completely changed all the dynamics. And again, this Postcard from Earth thing with Darren Aronofsky, the aerial photography in there is spectacular. They had a helicopter, but again, the 16K camera is out of this world.
Sounds amazing.
It does.
Yeah, I love all that stuff.
Have you ever been in the field on a really tough shoot? What's the nastiest place you've ever been to make a production?
Oh, you mean like locale-wise?
Yeah, like what's kind of the toughest place you've ever been to actually have to pull something out of your hat and deliver an episode or a doc in a challenging environment to film and work in?
I guess I made, in the weeks after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, when the city was just trying to open up again, when it was still sort of overrun and everybody just trying to get all the debris out. Southern Comfort was the music of New Orleans, and so they sent us down. BBDO is an ad agency. They sent us down to, I basically wrote and directed 9 music videos where they were basically live concert videos intercut with interviews and things.
From the survivors or the people who were affected?
From the musicians coming back for the first time and attending Voodoo Fest.
Oh, wow.
And so that was great, but challenging because there just was not a lot available, and you just you made do with whatever you could, you know? There's been plenty of challenging environments.
Have you ever filmed in India?
I've never filmed in India. I would love to.
I've had some tough times in India.
Yeah, I've never. No.
Yeah, it's India was tough. Like we did Tough Rides India, which was 56 days and about 10,000 miles all around India. But like every day, I almost died. Like every day.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was brutal. Just because obviously you've got cows walking around and other cars trying to run you off the road. But the craziest thing is the buses. So the bus drivers in India, a lot of them, they get paid. They get bonused if they arrive early or on time. It's a way of like trying to make, but that means they drive on the road like they're absolutely insane. So sometimes you'll just be driving along the road and you might see like a little hill up ahead, and then a bus will come in your lane at you just over that would happen a couple times a day, and trucks and construction, and then just bad, dangerous roads and storms and every day.
How many countries did you go to in that series?
So that was Tough Rides India. So we were just in India. So
But how many countries did you do tough rides in?
so we did Tough Rides China, which was 6 by 26 minutes. We did Tough Rides India, 6 by 26 minutes, and then we did Tough Rides Brazil, 6 by 26 minutes, and then I've got a COVID story for you. I was almost gonna do Tough Rides Saudi Arabia in 2020.
Mm.
Yeah. So I was based in Dubai at that time, and I was interested in Saudi Arabia, and obviously you read all the things in the press, and I was like, I don't care. I want to go see it for myself. I want to talk to people on the ground. I want to make my own decisions, not just reading stuff in the news. And I went and I really liked it. And I met a lot of really interesting people. I didn't meet the royal family or anything. I just went and met everyday people, and it was amazing. So I was like, I want to film here. So I started talking with, tourism partners, Ministry of Culture, all this kind of stuff to try to do a Tough Rides there. And we had it all green lit, and I was supposed to start filming in April 2020. And of course, everything got canceled. Yeah, that would have been pretty amazing.
That would have been pretty cool.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia is really visually stunning, and obviously the history is there, the culture is there. It's quite it hits you as quite an impressive place once you get out of Riyadh. Riyadh is very it's just a big crazy city, but once you get out of there, and I rented a car and drove all through the countryside and stuff like that, and it is visually spectacular. Yeah,
Middle East is somewhere that I have not shot before, but I would love to.
Yeah. There's a lot of production credits and tax credits and stuff like that if you film in the Middle East, but some of the crews that you have to hire to get those production credits can be a bit challenging. I think that's the word that most people in LA use when they talk about getting 30% production credits out of Abu Dhabi or something like that.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
So what are you looking at for 2024? We got 9 months ahead of us here. What's on the agenda?
10 months.
10 months ahead of us.
Oh, sure,
yeah. No, I won't do that again.
So couple of docs that I'm just getting ready to take out that I'm really, really excited about. One in the next couple of weeks.
And are these docs that are already finished that you're going to try to sell, or are these
No,
pitches?
These are pitches. These are ones that I've developed that go along well with a certain brand. And so we'll be taking those out. And I'll still take on gigs in the advertising world. We're splitting our time more and more between Los Angeles and London. And so I want to start picking up some gigs in London too. Because most of my work has been in LA, of course. So we'll see how it goes. But really, I'm just focused on these docs right now and creating this new deal structure that I think will be really beneficial to everybody. And if I can crack that, that's the goal for me this year.
Yeah. I mean, if you can crack the code of wanting to make the docs that you want to make and then bringing on a brand to fund it and give you the freedom that you want to tell that story, that's the dream come true, right?
It is. Yeah. It is. And I feel like I'm closer to it than ever before. It's been a lot of years coming.
When you're pitching a doc to a brand, do the majority of them want to see it on a streaming platform or on a broadcast network, or are they equally happy for you to push it through the Film Festival Network, for example? Because I'm curious, my deal with BMW, for example, was very much based on it being on Travel Channel and not just being a documentary TV series that, went straight to streaming, or ended up on Amazon Prime, through their back channels or whatever. They wanted to know that it was going to get a proper premiere. And I'm curious, when you're talking with brands, if there's any preference there.
I think that, first of all, linear TV gets less and less viewers, right? And so when we're talking about getting it out there, if you're talking about getting it out, say, on a Netflix or something, there's always the opportunities to co-produce a doc with Netflix and a brand. But I think that every project is different. It's sort of what you have to find out is, what does the brand want? What is most important to them? If they're going to be put on Netflix, which when I was at Grizzly and we were talking to brands, at first everybody was like, yes, and I will back a doc, and as long as it goes onto Netflix. And then the moment that you start to explain to them, you realize there's no marketing, right?
No.
That goes along with that.
The zero.
And then they all went, oh. And then all of a sudden, that doesn't look so incredibly appealing because what they want is eyeballs, obviously. So
some PR campaign for the launch. I mean, that's a bare minimum.
Yep. And so part of the deal when developing these docs is coming up with a plan for distribution and giving a brand options about depending upon what is most important to them, different options, how we can get the film out there. And I mean, that is part of the strategy that I've been working up since 2019 and trying to implement. I mean, I guess since 2020, really, once I left Grizzly is when I really started to drill down on. And once I left there and I started working with more agencies and really understanding a brand's wants and needs and things, when I really started to drill down on the strategy behind the distribution and what is their return. Those are exactly the things that I hope to roll out this year.
Well, that's great. That's that's exciting. No, I think the nice thing about where we are now is there's a lot more tools available. Like, so obviously you can put stuff up on YouTube, but it might get lost or you might not have the viewership. But there's one company called Filmhub, and then there's another company called Film Freeway. So Filmhub, you upload your content, a TV show or doc, and then you choose which like distribution partners you want them to pitch it to, and then they accept it or not accept it, and then you get like 0.002 cents per view or whatever. But it builds up over time. But you can get your content out on like 100 different platforms, at the press of a button, kind of. It takes a few months for it to like work its way through. And then the Film Freeway is you upload your content once, and then you can distribute it to all the film festivals around the world. So like these are two things that really didn't exist, 7 or 8 years ago. So it's become much easier now, like to self-distribute your content and to try to control it a little bit more to keep your brands or your advertising partners like happier, I suppose.
Yeah. And like you were talking about before, all the different things that can stem off of the film itself, right? All the speaking engagements and the events and things. And so really these days, a feature film becomes more like it creates more of an ecosystem for a brand to produce their own opportunities, really, and being able to capitalize on them. And it's just a matter of coming up with what you think those things are, what they could be. Mm-hmm. And then often, some of the brands that we would talk to, they already had their own ideas of what they wanted to do, where they wanted to put it, how it would fall within a larger plan. And that is the nice part about talking to ad agencies who are agencies of record for whatever brand it is. When they're coming up with a campaign, that's when one can, if you can get your film seen by those ad execs and be part of a larger pitch and a larger campaign, I mean, that's the sweet spot.
Yeah.
You just have to get in at the right time.
Yeah, it's not easy. Is there anything that you like don't want to work on, or any topics that you just like aren't interested in? Like for me, I'm kind of just making shows with me in them. So if the brand doesn't like me, that's the end of the conversation.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm guessing for you, like, you come with a few different ideas and a few different, but are there things that you just like won't work on? Like I hate politics. So whenever someone talks to me about going places and talking to people about politics, I just hate it. I won't do it. Like I love talking about life and because I think when you talk about life and you connect with people on that level, you realize how similar we all are, mm-hmm. like around the world, mm-hmm. and how we all just want the same things. Like, we want to take care of our families, have a roof over our head, have some basic level of security and all these kinds of things. But then when you start talking about politics, everything goes out the window and it just becomes a shit show. So like, I just refuse to kind of do that. But trying to find ways of connecting with people in other ways. I'm just curious if you have any topics that you just avoid.
I don't have topics that I avoid altogether. I have topics that I love, that I love stories about people or places or things, the culture that is shaping our world, mm-hmm. basically. That's one sort of bucket. And then I also love historical docs. Everything about historical docs. I will watch whatever you put on. If you're going to tell me the story of someone in the past who did something extraordinary or something, like I'm there. I'm always there. Finding new ways to tell historical stories visually is one of the things that I'm also super into and what I develop a lot of.
That's beautiful. Like, because it's so nice too. Like one of the extreme treks I did was through Papua New Guinea, and instead of just going through Papua New Guinea, I wanted to do a trail that had some history. So Papua New Guinea has a really interesting history. It was one of the major theaters of war in World War II in the Pacific because the Japanese wanted to take Papua New Guinea to use it as a platform to attack Australia. So the Australians went into Papua New Guinea to kick out the Japanese, and they basically fought a war over many years on this one trail called the Kokoda Trail. And the Japanese were coming south and the Australians were pushing them back north. And actually more soldiers on both sides died from the conditions and the weather and the diseases that they picked up while they were fighting than actually being killed by bullets. And it is brutal. It's brutal terrain. And we did this trek over this Kokoda Trail, and it was like 100 miles over 10 or 12 days through the most unbelievable rainforest I've ever been in. But there were many places along the way where we were able to tell the stories of the Australians pushing the Japanese back. So sorry for that tangent, but
No, I love that.
I love it too. Like being able to use nature and a landscape and a brutal physical experience to be able to like recreate some of that history was always something I tried to do.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Oh, tell me the story of any past especially war stories. I love it. Military history, obviously, being something I studied a lot. Yeah, I'm there for it, 100%. I know it's dork.
It's great. Well, look, is there anything else you want to promote or chat about? This has been epic. I'm loving it.
Yes, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate just rambling on about
Talking shop.
Talking shop. I know the state of things as today. Everything's changed so much. It just seems so crazy.
It has. But watch this. Now I can go here, and we can go to the wide one, and we can. Okay. Very nice to meet you.
Thank you so much.
And watch this.
Appreciate it.
Fade to black.
No, I.
And we're done.